Oh, baby, Justin. What in the world did we just watch?
I have so many thoughts on this episode, dude. But that's not the answer to your question. The answer to your question is episode 4 of Loki. We're officially 2/3 of the way through now, which is sad because I looked forward to this for so long. But dang, that was a crazy episode, which I'm guessing you thought the same thing given given that start.
Look, people know by the title of this upload that it's Loki episode 4. And if they've been following, they would know that after we did episode 3 last week, episode 4 is coming this week. So that actually isn't the answer to the question that I was looking for. I was looking for, what in the heck did we just watch? That was one of the craziest episodes of TV that I've seen in a long time. So much to unpack, and let's just, as Phil DeFranco says, let's just jump right into it.
Let's go.
This episode starts, and we see a flashback of young Sylvie, Lady Loki. She was living in her version of Asgard, and a team of TVA Minutemen, led by a younger Ravonna Renslayer, the judge from prior in the show and Mobius' boss. She's leading the squad, and they come and arrest Sylvie and wipe out her reality. She's taken through the whole TVA thing. We get kind of Cliff's Notes version of the process that Loki went through in the beginning of episode 1, and she goes right to the trial where she escapes. Obviously, she doesn't get reset because she's around later. But I thought this was kind of a silly scene. She kind of just, steps on Renslayer's foot and twists her arm a little bit and steals her temp pad really easily, and then kind of stares at her while she just escapes. Seems like Renslayer did a really, really bad job of, time copying there. But it's whatever. We see that Sylvie escapes, and that's what she tells Loki as well, is that she was taken from her reality at a young age, and that she has been hopping around through different apocalypses, surviving here and there throughout time ever since. Pretty tragic backstory.
Yeah, this scene was kind of goofy, I'll be honest. And I know you just said you thought it was a little bit silly. I totally agree. I understand what they were going for, trying to establish her backstory. And it's important backstory for sure. I think it could have been done slightly better. First of all, the thing that confused me was that she had black hair, which makes total sense being a Loki variant. But now she has blonde hair, so I don't know if she's dyed it or something to try and throw them off the scent. But she has to hide everywhere she goes anyway. So not a big deal, but I was just a little bit confused by that. But again, not even close to a big deal. But the thing for me was how she escaped. She's a small girl, which granted she's a frost giant, assuming that the origins of Loki in this variant situation are the same as the main timeline Loki. So she's stronger than a normal little girl, but she still is a little girl, and they're supposed to be at the TVA trained with handling variants of any species, of any kind, just literally anything that variates from the sacred timeline, right? Which means there must be monsters that are massive or super strong beings that they're constantly having to prune and bring in for trial. And she's able to escape, like you said, by stepping on a foot. I don't know. And the funniest thing is that, whatever her name is, I'm just going to call her Discount Michelle Rodriguez. Discount Michelle Rodriguez was a normal guard at that point, a normal time variant guard. And she later goes on to say how the timekeepers blamed her for losing the variant. But then all we see her now is that she's promoted and she's now the head honcho. So if she was responsible for losing the main variant that's been causing all this trouble throughout history, how the heck did she get promoted? Unless they were maybe your skills are just not in actually guarding people. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about it too much. But either way, it establishes that Sylvie was basically kidnapped at a young age and wasn't just immediately pruned, but has had to live with that on her own for quite a long time.
Yeah, I don't want to say you're reading too much into it, because I did think it was a little bit goofy as well. But I think the point of the scene was to just show that obviously Sylvie and Ravonna, I don't think she looks anything like Michelle Rodriguez, by the way. You're clearly haven't seen either of them in a long time to make that call at this time.
No, I looked at a picture. Right afterwards, and never mind, whatever.
It's besides the point. The point of this scene was that Sylvie and Ravonna have a history. This isn't the first time that they've met, and it shows that Sylvie was capable even at a very young age. She escapes the TVA far quicker than, the main Loki does, and she was just a kid. So she tells Loki later that she believes that being born female is what caused the TVA to be alerted to her, and that's why she was going to be pruned and her timeline reset. But she actually asked Ravonna about this later, and the judge says she doesn't remember why she was brought in, but she kind of has this sadistic smile while she says it, which means she's kind of just twisting the knife a little bit. She's trying to make Sylvie seem as unimportant as possible by saying, yeah, I don't even remember what you were brought in for. There's just so many people that we deal with all the time that are more powerful and more important than you that you're not even worth, the memory space in my mind.
But she definitely is, though, because Ravonna's been stressing about that ever since it happened. So she's lying to herself there.
Yeah, well, Ravonna is shaping up to be the villain of the show from what we've seen through this episode. So, again, seems like she's just being
a butt.
being the villain doing evil stuff here. Yeah, exactly. We then see Loki and Sylvie on Lamentus 1, and they're sharing a heartfelt moment as the planet is collapsing around them. But then they, I guess, hold hands or something, and that sets off a huge alert at the TVA. They show up in the nick of time and save the Loki and Sylvie from being crushed by the planet and moon colliding, but then just arrest them and take them back to the TVA. And I saw a post on Reddit which made me laugh and said, the TVA needs to really invest in some handcuffs because every time you see the guards in a prisoner, they got, 2 guards, one for each arm of the prisoner, and they're like dragging them down the hallway. Just get some handcuffs, and then you won't have to physically restrain these people on each side as you drag their unwilling bodies down the hall. I just thought that was funny.
Especially if you get someone super strong that can just, flick them off with one arm each. You think handcuffs would be nice.
Exactly. Mobius makes point later in the episode that they brought in Kree and Titans and Vampires. He says, yeah, which, I know we've seen that Blade has been announced already. Mahershala Ali, butchered that on the first try, is going to be playing Blade in the upcoming Marvel movie. Does not have a release date, was not part of the Phase 4 announcement, so we're not expecting to see that for a while, but it is confirmed in the pipeline at some point coming. So good to know that existence of vampires is being acknowledged by other people in the MCU as well.
That being said, he acknowledges super strong species that exist. One of them could very easily break out if they're just having their arms held by 2 humans, So get some handcuffs, TVA. You got all the technology in the world. Spend a little bit on some better security, especially since you're guarding something supposedly as important as all of existence. But yeah, Loki and Sylvie, how did they get off of that planet? Or I guess it's the moon. How did they get off of Lamentus? I know we saw officially what happened. There's the Nexus Event and the TVA shows up. We never really find out exactly what the Nexus Event is. They kind of hint at it, but never say explicitly. As far as we've gathered just from this episode is that it's like their emotional connection, basically, which is super weird. I don't think anybody is rooting for that. But if that's the Nexus Event, I'm a little bit confused, and I'm curious to see what the full explanation is, because that wouldn't really change anything if the moon hit them and it blew up, if they had this connection or not. Mobius later on explains that since they're variants of the same being, but especially after the way the last episode ended, it was very, ex machina. They were able to just, get off in the first scene. So I bet there's a good explanation for it, and I'm curious to see what that is. But right then I was like, well, that was easy. They should have just held hands sooner and they would have been fine.
Yeah, it did seem to be a little convenient that they didn't actively find a way off, or the TVA didn't find a way to get them there. It just kind of happened accidentally, and it worked out in their favor. That bothered me a little bit when I watched, but I'm sure there will be an explanation for it later. I just would have liked to see, our main characters or Mobius or anybody at the TVA use a little ingenuity and maybe use some of the creativity Loki used earlier in the show as he found the variant's hiding spot throughout time. I wanted to see somebody solve that puzzle and get them off in a creative way. Or maybe Loki had a plan all along that was working out. But nope, they're saved by a happy accident, which is fine, I guess.
Type of thing that would only happen in a week-to-week TV show, just so they can have the cliffhanger at the end of last episode.
Yeah, exactly. But also, it was a cliffhanger at the end of the last episode, but nobody really expected that Loki and Sylvie were going to die there. We were just waiting to see how it happened, and it was a pretty lame way for it to happen. But if there's a good explanation for it later, I'll let it slide. Yeah, they're brought back to the TVA headquarters, and Mobius is gonna get another crack at interrogating Loki. He first puts him in a time cell to kind of mellow out, which basically just ends up being a replaying of this moment from Loki's past where apparently he played a prank on Lady Sif. He cut her hair. This apparently has roots in actual Norse mythology where Loki cuts off Sif's hair as a prank and Thor gets really angry and demands that he fix it. So Loki has to convince some dwarf craftsman to make new hair for Sif, and they actually make some other items for those gods as well, including Mjolnir. So a little bit of some interesting mythology there from Marvel, including a scene like that. But basically, he just has to relive this moment.
Peter Dinklage, also a barber on the side.
Oh, yeah.
Also a stylist.
Yeah, well, it looked pretty bad, so clearly he wasn't. That's why he lets his hair go long, is because he doesn't know how to cut it. So Loki is in the time cell, just reliving this moment where Sif is furious with him and knees him in the balls and slaps him a couple of times. And basically she's like, you are alone, you're made to be alone, and you'll always be alone. And so that ends up eating at him more and more as this moment keeps replaying over and over, even more than the physical slaps do. And so he kind of breaks down inside the cell as he's dealing with something like he grappled with in the first episode, where he breaks down and has this moment of self-realization. He kind of is like, yes, I'm alone. Like, I deserve to be alone. And he's just cracking emotionally in the cell.
We were talking about this last week. This is slightly off track. But last week when we were talking about how many majestic hair flips Loki has done in the MCU, I think some of the ones in this time cell were some of the most majestic, and I'm just imagining how many got added to his resume while he was stuck in there for such a long time, just getting slapped and flipping his hair up again and again. It was so funny. The first time I saw him do it, I just immediately thought of what you had said last week, and it started killing me. But yeah, it's a very personal attack, and it's clearly something that is a deep insecurity for him, the thought that he might end up living alone forever, which is something he hasn't seemed to care about much up until this point, but probably is just him being in denial and trying to put on that tough bravado, or the not caring about really anything, because he starts kind of breaking down as Sif keeps hitting him and telling him this again and again and again. He eventually breaks down and is like, yeah, I'm worthless, basically. As funny as it was initially, seeing the hair flips, it was a very sad scene and a very sad thought, seeing him trapped in this kind of physical torment, but, he gets punched and beat up all the time anyway, but especially the mental and emotional. It's like, man, they don't have a law against cruel and unusual punishment in the TVA, apparently. So
they certainly do not. That is for sure. They have some downright insidious punishments at the TVA. But yeah, Loki is going through this moment over and over again, just making him emotionally softer, just more agreeable to talk with the TVA so he can get out of the cell. And Mobius, goes in after a while. He's like, listen, you ready to talk? Let's talk. And he starts to interrogate him. And Loki kind of interjects. And he's like, listen, these questions that you're asking me aren't what's important. You guys are all variants, and the TVA is lying to you. And Mobius almost believes him, but thinks that he's lying. He's like, oh, almost had me on that one. And then Loki realizes that he's kind of the boy who cried wolf. He's tried to trick everybody so many times over and over that now when he's telling the truth, or at least what he believes to be the truth, he can't get anybody to believe him. So he doesn't end up giving Mobius really the information that he wants, and Mobius ends up sending him back into the time cell at the end of their short interrogation.
Yeah, there's something I think that clicks a little bit, or at least gets implanted into Mobius's head. You can just see from his facial expression, and we can see throughout the rest of the episode that it sticks in his head what Loki says about them all being variants, especially because earlier on in the episode, when talking with Ravonna, when she tells Mobius that C20 died because she started to lose her mind, he's a little bit suspicious about that because she seemed fine when he had last seen her. So I think those things together, hearing that C20 died, even though he didn't see anything wrong with her the last time he had seen her, plus what Loki said, you can see things kind of start to add up with him. Even though he still doesn't believe it yet, it kind of leads Mobius to some of the things that he does later in the episode. Part of it might be just not wanting to give Loki the satisfaction of convincing him initially, and also just not trusting him still. But there's a little bit that happens there in his head.
Yeah, you can kind of see the gears start turning as Loki's statement gets him thinking about it a little bit, but he's almost like no, it can't be. Like, there's no way that's true. But Loki, he calls Mobius a liar, and he's like, you're a bigger liar than I ever am, or ever was, or ever will be, because you're telling all these lies to yourself. And that's really what gets Mobius. He's like, okay, I got to start thinking hard about myself and my life and everything I believe, basically. So while this has all been going on, B-15, the hunter that we've seen earlier that was possessed by Sylvie in episode 2 in the superstore, she's been kind of freaking out. And we see her enter the chamber, or cell, I guess, the time theater where they're keeping Sylvie, and she opens a time gate, or a time door, whatever we're calling it, and is like, come with me. Takes her back to the superstore, and she's like, listen, you showed me something when you were in my head. Like, what was that? She's like, listen, those were memories of your past life. Like, I can't create realities when I'm in people's minds. I have to use what's already there. And so B-15 is like crying in the rain. She's just about to break down. She's like, you have to show me what my life was. And so Sylvie does. And we just see the emotion on B-15's faces. We can only imagine what she's reminiscing on and what new memories are being exposed to her. And she's like, I looked happy, which is just a heartbreaking moment. And I realized that just all these people who are working for the TVA are just basically enslaved and had lives that they have no memory of. And it's pretty messed up when you think about it.
And she probably lived right next to a Chick-fil-A, got to eat there every day, and now she has to remember that she got that taken away from her.
Except Sunday.
Man, no, it's tough. Like, especially once you get to that point where you get reminded of that, right? Like, if you're kind of in blissful ignorance, I suppose, it's still horrible, but it's not necessarily painful to experience if you think that you've still been created by the TVA. Right? But especially once that door gets opened and you're made aware, once B-15's made aware that there was this whole past life she was living, how on earth can you just continue not questioning it, literally everything? Just horrible. It really makes you wonder if every single person at the TVA is a variant, or how many people know that they are or not, because like we find out later, and as we kind of had guessed, the timekeepers are kind of a big joke. So there has to be some people at the top, or at least a person that knows kind of what's all going on. And this ends up being true as well when we go into the next scene. When Mobius and Ravonna end up talking, Mobius starts asking her a bunch of questions about why she wouldn't let him interrogate Sylvie and what really happened to C20 and things like that. And she is just deflecting and is like, oh, I didn't want her to escape. And he doesn't believe that. And then she's like, oh, I wanted to keep you safe. Yada yada. And so it seems pretty clear that she at least is aware. And so it just makes me curious as to how many people at the TVA are aware, if it's only her or if there's other high-ranking people that are as well. But it's really tough seeing B-15 kind of grapple with this. But yeah, let's continue diving into that next scene with Mobius and Ravonna. What were your thoughts on that, Steve? When she was asking him, like, if you go anywhere, anytime, where would it be? And he's like, I can, and I have.
I was just getting very uncomfortable vibes from that whole conversation. You could tell that Mobius is now starting to question things. He's trying to weasel information out of Ravonna, but she is a smart cookie as well and can tell that something's up with Mobius. So she's being a little guarded and not answering his questions, which is, making him more and more curious and her more and more defensive. So neither of them was really getting what they wanted out of that conversation, but it was just very tense, and I was wondering if any important information was going to be revealed there. But Ravonna stays quiet, and Mobius is still left wondering. But he does end up swiping her tempad as her back is turned. He swaps them out on the table, and Then, as he's about to go, Ravonna tells him that they're going to be pruning the Lokis and that the Timekeepers want Mobius present there personally, as they will be there as well for the pruning of the Lokis. And this gets Mobius a little excited because he's never met them before, as well as we haven't seen them on screen yet either. So very exciting scene coming up. But then that's the end. He leaves Ravonna's office and goes, I guess, the record room or whatever it is, the library, and he watches on her tempad some footage from C20's file. It shows that she's deceased, but it also has a log of their last interview, I guess, before she died. And she is saying basically that she had a life before the TVA. She's saying all the stuff that Sylvie said, that everybody's all variants and they've all just been enslaved by the TVA against their will. And Ravonna steps in the frame and shuts off the camera, stops the interview, and Mobius's fears are confirmed. So Loki was telling the truth, and Ravonna and the TVA have been lying to him for as long as he knows. So he goes back to the time cell to retrieve Loki, and they have a nice little back and forth. Mobius has a very good line where he turns to Loki and he says, you can be whatever, whoever you want, even somebody good, just in case nobody ever told you that. And Loki has a smile, and they head out the time cell, ready to take down the TVA, right into the arms of Renslayer and a task force waiting for them outside the time cell.
Yeah, you knew they were not getting out of that. Mobius tries to play it off cool. They know that he swapped out the tempads, which, can we talk about that tempad for a second? That thing literally can travel through dimensions and time and space. It also apparently has a camera and a memory feature, which, okay, where the heck did those come from? But the camera looks like it's from like the 1800s. Like the quality on it is so terrible. Like the technology on this thing is so good, and it's so grainy, and it has little color. I don't know. It was kind of funny, but whatever.
Yeah, it is interesting that the TVA is so powerful and has technology to travel through time and space at will to anywhere and any time they want. But they're also using like 1970s computers and old library stacks for storing information. And yeah, it's just very interesting. It seems like whoever's behind the TVA has obviously, powerful abilities to put something like that into place, but either has like a nostalgia for oldie Earth tech, or is actually not super tech savvy, and so they're not able to utilize higher end technologies, or maybe it's purposefully low end technology so that whatever variants they use can easily adapt to it and not struggle too much in that environment. That could be a reason, but it is very interesting aesthetic that the TVA has.
And I get part of it is just the whole idea of the TVA being this government kind of old-timey bureaucracy type of deal. But I think they'd be a lot more efficient, especially because they can just go anywhere in history or future and just swipe some technology and then drop a reset charge and then boom. But whatever. Or use one of the Infinity Stones that they got there. The Reality Stone makes some nice MacBook Airs instead of whatever things they're working on now, but whatever. Jumping back to what we had been talking about before. Yeah, Mobius and Loki come out of the time cell and are just immediately confronted. Mobius tries to talk their way out of it and quickly realizes that that's not going to happen. And so he answers the question that Ravonna had been asking him in their meeting just a couple scenes prior, when she asks him if you could go anytime, anywhere, where would it be? And he's like, you know what? I want to go back to where the heck I came from. Like, I want to go back to my old life. I want to know what it was. Heck, maybe I even had a jet ski. And, oh man, dude, I'm praying that we get a Loki and Mobius on a jet ski scene at some point. Just bros cruising around on a jet ski. I think everybody's rooting for that. Maybe even just as a end credits scene or something. But, yeah. He's like, I know that basically. He doesn't come out and say that explicitly, but it's very clear that he's like, I know, and what are you going to do about it? And then they step up and zap him and prune him. Is this the first major death in this show that we've seen? Or at least at the time we see it, we think it's a death. I think so, right?
Yes, I believe it is.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking. I was like, man, oh, wow.
Wow.
We just totally lost Mobius. Which also, when I rewatched this episode in preparation for this, there were a couple different sentences that Mobius ended on the word now, and man, let me tell you, Owen Wilson saying the word now sounds almost identical to him saying the word wow, which obviously everybody loves, and it's just a meme, him saying the word, oh wow. If you rewatch and if you listen carefully for when he says the word now, like right now, it sounds exactly the same. It's too funny. But not funny is the fact that he gets pruned and zapped out of existence, and Loki is just there, shell-shocked, and then gets grabbed on both arms again because they don't have any handcuffs still, and just gets marched off to the timekeepers. And honestly, I thought the episode was going to end here. I was so invested in the episode up till this point that I forgot how long into it we were. I thought we had been watching for way longer than we had been, and I did not expect really everything that happened afterwards to be in this episode. I kind of thought that we would get brought right up to the timekeepers, and then it would open, and that would be it. So I was very pleased with the entire rest of the episode.
Yeah, I was expecting the same exact thing. When they went into the elevator to go see the timekeepers, I was fully expecting it to cut to the credits right there, and I was going to be livid. But they actually go forward with it, and we see the timekeepers in all their glory. And all their glory turns out to be some really crappy-looking, Disney park animatronic looks, I guess. It was really bad. They looked terrible. And I was about to be a little confused as to what happened to the good visuals that Marvel has had in every single one of their movies. Not everything's been amazing, but I mean, this would be by far the worst looking thing in any of their properties so far. And it's revealed at the end of the scene that they're animatronics, as they look real bad. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised based on what happens next, but B-15 breaks in and sets free Loki and Sylvie. Their collars are popped off, and she tosses them a sword.
A sword for two of them.
I guess for some reason she had a sword to spare. Yeah, that was helpful. And then we have a super edited, choppy action scene, which I almost got a headache watching because cut so many times. But essentially, they knock out all the other hunters. Sylvie takes care of Ravonna. She's incapacitated to the side.
Not even. She just punches her one time.
Oh, barely, I guess, yeah. And then she throws her sword at the timekeeper in the middle, and his head pops off, and it turns out they're animatronics. So there's a reason that they look like crap, because they're total BS. So as they're struggling with what's just happened and their world getting reshaped again, Sylvie's end goal basically was to get to the timekeepers and kill them, and now she's finding out that there's somebody else even behind them. And Loki even asked the question, he's like, who created the TVA? If there's nobody behind the curtain, again, some Wizard of Oz stuff going on here, there's got to be somebody actually running the show here. So this show revealed something. I think we all knew that the timekeepers were not necessarily on the up and up based on what we had learned through the first few episodes, but this kind of confirms that they were paper tigers, and now we are still left wondering who's actually behind the scenes. My money's still on Kang, but not confirmed, so we'll see what happens.
Bro, the instant they walked into that room and we see this Lorax-looking Five Nights at Freddy dude sitting in that chair up there with the giant mustache, I'm just like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. There's no possible way anybody looks at this and believes that these are the beings, these human-shaped people that sit there, never move, only their mouths move and their heads bend slightly, and they look like they're made out of cushions, basically, the material that their skin looks like. I'm like, there's no chance anyone looks at this and believes that these are the beings that created literally time itself. Come on. I was literally laughing out loud when I saw them. That one dude with the mustache, he's gonna go out and save the trees or something. Oh my goodness, he looked exactly like the Lorax. But yeah, no, it was clear that kind of from the beginning, from the first episode almost, that either the timekeepers were not real, or they were a front for something, or that they were the ones that were kind of nefarious, and obviously that one did not end up being true. And so, yeah, like you said, we're still waiting and wondering what the real face behind is, which, yeah, it's pretty late in the series to be introducing something brand new as big as a villain behind everything. So I hope it happens first thing in the next episode. I hope that's not a reveal that they keep till the very end And I really hope it's not something that they keep until the finale. Although if they do, and if it is Kang, then I think that's actually okay, as long as they don't resolve it also in the finale. So I'm kind of hoping that whoever the villain is, even if it's not Kang, I'm kind of hoping that it's something that extends far beyond the show. And I'm kind of hoping that it doesn't even get resolved in the finale. Just because 2 episodes does seem like not super long to set up, develop, or introduce, develop, and resolve conflict with a big villain that's been behind this entire thing. Just like how when there was 2 episodes left in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and we didn't yet know who the power broker was, clearly it was going to end up being someone that was already there. So obviously the power broker is a much smaller character than whoever's behind this, and so even more so introducing and totally resolving something in just 2 episodes I think will be a bit interesting if that does end up happening. Or like I suggested, if it just introduces a villain but doesn't necessarily defeat or resolve that. I think that's totally a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think what's most likely is that Renslayer is kind of the villain for this show, and then we possibly get a tease, maybe a name drop, potentially a visual of Kang or whoever the actual villain is behind everything. You know, we learn that they are certainly the ones behind it, but we don't actually get them introduced in this show. Maybe in like an end credit scene for the final episode, but I think it's more likely that Renslayer is just kind of the baddie for this one. She's got a personal connection to, you know, Mobius and to Sylvie. She's the one that kind of knows what's going on. And so it seems like she's going to be the one that's kind of the primary antagonist of this 6 episodes. But definitely room for an introduction for another big bad that's going to be coming down the line. And Kang makes perfect sense. Got a connection to Renslayer in the comics. So it makes only sense that they be introduced in the same show. But I guess we'll see if Marvel decides to go that route. Now, as they're contemplating their fate here, Loki is about to, I guess, kiss Sylvie. He looks like he's about to make like a heartfelt speech and then just kiss her. He like puts his hands on her shoulders and looks like he's about to lean in. Very weird, but he is then pruned out of nowhere. Renslayer was apparently not dead after just one punch. Surprisingly, she survived it and prunes our main character, Loki. I was in shock. I couldn't believe that happened. It was like the red wedding of Loki.
The red wedding of Loki.
Yeah, basically.
AKA all of Loki gone. Even though it's just one.
Exactly.
Bruh, the instant that fight was happening and Sylvie knocked her down and punched her and did not kill her or prune her, after killing every other guard and not having any like second guess or hesitation about it. The instant she just punched her and got up, I literally out loud said, "What are you doing?" Like, finish her off. And then go figure she's fine and she gets up and prunes Loki. I was losing my mind there. I was like, people, what rule is it? Number 2 in Zombieland? Double tap.
Which leads me to my second rule, the double tap.
Whatever the rule is, double tap. It's one of the top rules. Zombie apocalypse or fighting people that want you dead. Double tap. Make sure they're dead or at least knocked out for a severe amount of time. Don't just punch them once and leave them and turn your back on them. I was going crazy. Man.
Yeah, that was a new move.
That was absolutely a new move. Get that guy a manual.
Give that guy a manual. What are you doing?
What are you doing, Sylvie? My gosh. Yeah, pretty embarrassing stuff. Rookie mode out there from our lady Loki.
I was going to say Loki and Mobius in one episode. Pruned. What was your first thought after that happened?
I was like, there's no way that they're going to be gone. I was sure that they were going to be brought back in some way. Loki even yells at the timekeepers as they're discussing their fate. He's like, "Go ahead, kill me. I've lost track of how many times I've died, so do your worst." And I mean, he's kind of right. I mean, he's died more than a handful of times at this point and has come back in some way or another. So it's getting kind of ridiculous. You know, he gets pruned. Sylvie takes Renslayer kind of hostage. She's like, "Listen, you're going to tell me everything about what's going on." And I guess we'll find out where that goes next episode because that's the last we see of them. But We then see Loki wake up somewhere. Post-credit scene. First one in this show. So you're going to want to stick around to see it if you missed it the first time. Loki wakes up on some desolate land, I guess. It looks like torn down New York, as you can see a crumbling Stark Tower in the background. But it's unclear what timeline or dimension this is. And he says, "Am I dead?" And a voice answers back. He says, "No, but you will be if you don't come with us." And the camera pans out, and there's
This was so goofy.
4 beings there. This was one of the craziest end credit scenes I think has ever been in Marvel history. Loki wakes up in a crumbled New York. He's woken up by 4 other Loki variants. There is a kid version of himself with an older version of himself right next to him wearing his classic comic costume, which I thought was a great way to pay homage to the comic look. Another lovely tie-in. We had the Halloween costumes in WandaVision that Quicksilver and Wanda and Vision all wore to pay homage to their original looks in the comics. We had Captain America wear his goofy spangly costume as he was paraded around America early in his origin movie. And so this is another great way to show another classic comic look. We have an old Loki in his bright yellow and green goofy underpants look. And we also have a tall black Loki with a hammer. I think that was a Loki based on the simple assumption that there are only other Lokis there, so that would be my guess. But he did have a hammer, so it could potentially be a Thor variant that's down there as well.
That was my first thought, yeah.
In whatever Loki purgatory this is. I don't really know what to call it. It's like Davy Jones' locker, but for Lokis. And finally, the kid version of Loki is holding a crocodile Loki with a little horned hat. It was the greatest thing I've ever seen. A little alligator Loki. And we don't see who's talking when we turn around. The camera turns around and we see all these Lokis. I really want... It would be so great if it turns out that the deep voice that came from off screen was the alligator talking to Loki. How amazing would that be? I really hope that is the case.
We already got a raccoon in a tree. Why the heck not a gator? That's what I want to know. Bro, that killed me. Oh my god. Like, the first one that I noticed was the old man, because he just looked hilarious. But then I noticed the gator, and I was... It's like a baby gator, too. The kid's holding him. It's tiny. It's just so funny.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the crazier end credit scenes I can remember.
Well, yeah, because it shows us that pruning doesn't just zap you out of existence. It sends you somewhere. Where the heck is it? Is it an existing universe? Is it the Soul Stone?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not the Soul Stone, but, you know, this alternate dimension type of deal. Is it like a prison? I don't know. You mentioned Davy Jones' locker, that type of thing. It's probably as close to the guess as we're going to get, but, man, are they going to have to figure out a way out, or is someone going to have to come in and save them?
Yeah, it's like maybe Limbo from Inception. There's so much going on in this show, and a ton happened this episode, don't get me wrong. Again, though, I feel like it's another case of more questions being asked than answered. We already knew the timekeepers weren't all that they claimed to be based on a couple episodes ago last episode where Sylvie revealed that all the TVA agents are variants. So now we know that, it's confirmed that there's somebody else pulling the strings behind the scenes, but we still don't know who that is. Now we have another question of what the heck happens after you get pruned, because we thought it was just death, but now it seems like you get sent to like some garbage disposal timeline where other versions of yourself that have been pruned are potentially. We have no idea what's going on with that. We still don't know what Sylvie's plan was, if it was just to like kill the timekeepers or take control of TVA, and none of those questions were answered. So this show just continues to impress, keeping us on edge every single week with new twists and turns. And this episode was one of the best so far, I thought. Probably the best episode, although I am a big fan of number 2.
Yeah, I'm between this one and number 2 as well. I'll have to rewatch number 2 to decide, but this was an excellent episode. I do think the beginning was a little bit silly, but other than that, the whole episode held my attention all the way through. This one was one that seemed long, which I think it was about the same length as the first 2, but especially coming off of last week. Like, every new scene that happened this week, I was like, man, this feel like it's been going on forever, in the best way, right? I was like, man, even more, let's go. It was so good, and yeah, it just held my attention the whole time, and every single new scene was tense, and something new was getting added to the mix, and like you said, not a whole lot was resolved, just a whole lot more questions were brought up. But that's kind of what this show has been doing the whole time, so yeah, I love this episode. I think it's going to be great rewatching as well later on, so exciting stuff. Man, I'm hyped for next week. Let's go.
This week-to-week stuff, I cannot emphasize enough how much it is killing me to wait in agonizing pain for this show on a day-by-day basis. And I think that just makes it better. The anticipation week-to-week, the theorizing, the speculation about what could happen or who's really behind everything is part of what drives the show. And I think Marvel knows that. Conversations on the internet about the show are what, keeps the fandom alive, and, people speculating before, during, and after the show's airtime are going to just be free advertising for your show, basically. So the more you can keep people talking and theorizing and thinking week to week about your show, the more you're going to drag people in. So as much as I'd love to have watched the entire episode in a single day if they released it all at once, which, don't get me wrong, I would have done that exact thing, I do appreciate the drip feed of episodic releases here.
And hey, if you think about it as we have Loki, I have to wait 4 days until Rick and Morty, and then I have to wait 3 days until Loki. It's really not so bad. You're not having to wait an entire week for goodness. And Steve, this is the only week before the finale that we're going to have to wait a whole week for Marvel stuff. Because next Friday, it's next Friday, right? Black Widow, baby!
Oh, it's Black Widow Day, baby. But did you know that it's actually Thursday, because releases come out on Thursdays. So everybody, tip and tricks if you weren't aware for whatever reason. Whenever you see a release date in the theater, you can go see it the day before in most places, because they'll have some Thursday showings. So I already got my tickets booked. Got them well in advance because I knew seats would fill up, especially with still not 1,000% capacity at some theaters.
I'm stuck here, dude. This past Sunday, we just went up another level of lockdown here in South Africa. As you guys are there hanging out free and alive in America, COVID numbers are here worse than basically ever since the beginning of the pandemic. And yeah, so we're locked down another level. So movie theaters are not open right now. And our TV in the house is tiny. So I haven't decided if I want to wait a little bit on Black Widow or if I want to watch it on our tiny TV and miss out on the theater experience. I probably will still end up watching it right away just because we're going to have to talk about it and because I don't want to get anything spoiled or anything. But I'm going to be so disappointed if I have to watch it on our tiny little TV instead of on the big screen. Especially because I was going to go see Fast 9 this week. Or excuse me, F9 this week. And
excuse you, F9 The Fast Saga.
F9 The Fast Saga.
The full title. Thank you.
My bad. Yeah, no, I was going to see that this week as well. And now I cannot. So that's one I also want to see on the big screen. So that one I can wait a little bit for. I'm not dying for that one as much as I am for Black Widow, although I'm very, very excited for that as well. So a bit of a bummer here, but, it's the world we live in, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, there's only so much you can do. So if you end up watching it on the screen, I'm sure we'll discuss it. If not, I can be patient, and I'm sure the people can wait as well. We'll get around to Black Widow when we both get a good viewing of it, and I'm sure if you guys are waiting on our review to go see it, you have problems making decisions in other areas of your life as well. So you should just go see it.
I don't think there's a single person out there waiting on our recommendation.
Yeah, there definitely shouldn't be, but just in case, I want to cover all our bases. Yeah, don't
do that.
So yeah, cannot wait for next week with Black Widow and another episode of Loki coming out in back-to-back days. That will be a fantastic week. But yeah, that's about it for this week. A great episode. Again, raises a ton more questions for not only the show, but the MCU as a whole. And we are still waiting for answers on many of those. I'm completely lost in the show. I'm enjoying the ride. And I'm just excited for what's coming next.
Me too. Let's go.
All right, well, that'll do it for this week then. little bit shorter than normal, but definitely longer than last week. So maybe we can put some more ads in this week. Yeah, maximize that revenue.
Oh, yeah. Well, we are not sponsored, but maybe if we just start reading off ads, maybe we can...
Yeah, if we just start saying ads for stuff we like, then maybe places will just naturally give us sponsorship over time. Just start promoting stuff that we appreciate.
Yeah. Well, if that worked, then Disney would have sponsored us a long time ago.
We still got time.
Oh, man.
But yeah, Disney, Marvel, pick us up, please.
Yeah. Well, that's why we got to start talking about... board games and sports and stuff, man. Get
We
some
do.
other,
Yeah, we got other stuff, but we're not going to be strictly Marvel, but there is a lot of it coming up. So we're going to have a pretty steady flow of it for a good while. But yeah, we're definitely going to have to talk about some board games. Justin and I just acquired a copy of Twilight Imperium, the 4th edition.
None of the people here have ever heard of that.
That's a game that's been on our horizon for a long time. Lots of you may not know what it is. Probably nobody who listens to this actually knows what it is, but it's a very in-depth board game that takes many hours to play and involves the political shaping of a galaxy. And I'm very excited to play it. Justin, I know you're thrilled to get this one on the table when you get back.
Or tables, because it's so big.
But yeah, we got plenty of board games in the rotation that we can start talking about in the future. So that may be mixed into our podcast cycle as well. But we shall see what the future brings. You never know what we're going to discuss.
Until you read the title and start listening, but then you'll know.
That'll probably be a dead giveaway, but oh well.
Unless we start mixing them up, just lying in the title.
Exactly. Who knows? Who knows what the title of this episode will be? Maybe it'll be Elephants Rampage Through New York City. Breaking news. But we're actually just talking about Loki.
Once we get a full-time editor, we can have someone more creative with titles start making them rather than me. So, but that day is a long way off.
Yeah.
So we need to get sponsored first by Squarespace or something. Skillshare.
Yeah, that's definitely the first priority. So yeah, Squarespace, Honey, Skillshare, one of those big sponsor places. Throw us a bone.
Raycons.
Raycons, dude. Yeah.
Raid Shadow
Throw
Legends.
us a bone. I'm serious. Yeah, that'll do it for this episode. We are discussing Loki episode 4, and we'll be back next week for episode 5, penultimate episode of the show, with only one more to follow. So should be a pretty big episode next week. Tom Hiddleston has said that episodes 4 and 5 are his favorite of the show, so expecting big things, but we'll be back to discuss them next week.
Yeah, episode 4. It's a good one. Check it out if you haven't. And we will see you next week.
Indeed.
All right.
Peace.